Well, I'll discuss about Dr. Wang's study. I believe it was too risky to choose a parametric test with this study. The first problem here, I believe it was the sample size. He had 50 women, and 50 is a number that it's not quite small, which could invalidate or turns ineffective every statistical test, but it's not considered a large enough sample. And as we read in the chapter 10, large enough could be 70 or 100 or 200 depending on the author. So with 50, he could not expect normally distributed. It's too risky to assume that he would have normally distributed data, and then it would be safer, because when you don't know if you have normal distribution, it's safer, it's better to choose a non-parametric test. The second problem here, I believe it was the outcome variable. His back depression inventory is an instrument which has multiple questions, and each question is has an ordinal constructed item, and the final score is a sum of all the items. So many researchers consider this as an interval scale, and being an interval scale, it can be considered as a continuous variable, but other researchers don't. So it's not a consensus, it's controversial, and there is a debate if this kind of questionnaire, this kind of instruments could be considered as a continuous. So having Dr. Wang having 50 people, so a sample that it's not that small, but it's not large enough, and considering he has an outcome that might not be considered continuous, I think parametric test is too risky to him to use. So finally, what highlights this week case to me is that we should be careful to properly choose the statistical test a priori, because if you do that after you collect the data, you cannot have a valid study, or you can have only considered exploratory study, because you have all of your... I don't think if I really understood that. It's a question for the office hour, but I believe that you should choose your statistical test a priori, because your sample size calculation, your study designs depends on the power of your statistical test. So in this case, whatever the situation, 1, 2, or 3, Dr. Wang decides, I believe it won't change many things, because he studied 5 years of study, and his manuscript can only be considered exploratory. So it was very significant to me to read that this week. That's it.